Welcome to our weekly webinar series on Humpy Center of Design, weekly talks. So today we have an amazing friend of mine, architect Shreya Sen, with us, and she will take us onto a beautiful journey on understanding tension in buildings or tensile structures in architecture. A small brief about Shreya. She's been an assistant professor at Kamalaraja Vidyanidhi Institute of Architecture and Environmental Studies for some time. Did a master's in architecture at IIT Roorkee and was part of the German academic exchange program, University of Stuttgart, which was initiated by architect Frey Otto. And as we all know, Frey Otto is one of the masters of the, or what do you say, instigators of this beautiful concept of tensegrity. She has presented many papers across the world and has conducted workshops across the country on tensile architecture and form finding. I do have a small story to tell you, and I've taken permission from Shreya to share this with you. The first time I met Shreya, I was a little taken aback because I saw that here was an architect without one hand. She doesn't have a right hand, and very they say self-sufficient, motivated to do things on her own. And I would like her to share her story on that experience of losing that hand and coming back and fighting that battle. It's a great learning for all of us to understand that even a huge setback like losing your main hand in an accident didn't deter her to achieve what she wanted to do, and went on to top the university in the coming year, and went on to do her master's from IIT Roorkee, and also did her tensile architectural studies at an institute promoted by Frey Otto. Okay, over to Shreya Sen.
What is tensile architecture? The word tensile in itself stands for the ten in it stands for tension. So the architecture where tension forces play a major role in structural stability is the architecture of tension or tensile structures. So we begin with the origin story of tensile structures or tensile architecture, and a good number of my students and people with whom I've spoken about this topic tell me that it seems pretty futuristic, and but like when I read about it, when I studied further about it, I thought that is it really that futuristic? So as I said, in this image, as you see in the screen right now, there are two rings, steel rings, and the inner small ring is suspended inside the outer ring with a series of fabric saddle forms. So these pieces of fabric is what is supporting the inner ring together. Both the rings here are compression rings, and the tension which is being provided by the fabric members here is what is holding the inner ring and the outer ring also in a stable state. So here, this is a perfect example of tensile structure, because if say I snipe off or I cut off all the fabric pieces, the inner ring will just fall off because it does not have any other support system. So here the tension is providing structural support or structural stability to the inner ring in collaboration with the outer ring. So even if the outer ring is removed, just the pieces of fabric will not be able to hold the inner ring in place. So here everything comes together and forms a whole unit, which is further, which basically makes it stable. So the tensile forces in the fabrics, in the membranes, as in technical terminology, is what is holding the inner ring in place, and that is the architecture of tension or tensile structures. So coming back to my previous thing that I was talking about, dried skin has been used on this. In this image right now, you see yurts. Yurts are basically when man was a nomadic hunter-gatherer, the kind of houses that they used to build for themselves. They used to be covered with dried skin. Here, the dry skin is being used as a constructional fabric in a way, because it's protecting man from the element, from the weather. But is the drying helping in giving it structural stability? If yes, then how? So the drying is basically, what it does is that it soaks up the water which is present in animal skin, and it thins the cross-sectional layer, basically adding elasticity, adding tension to the fabric so that the fabric can be stretched. So here was one of the very first examples of tension being used. But tension is not being used here structurally. Tension is just being used here as a cladding, as a covering. Then we see the Roman Colosseum over here. And this is, I don't know if you are aware of, the Colosseum had something which is a temporary kinetic awning. So this was one of the first examples where the membrane would unfurl and furl back as and when desired. So when the spectators are sitting there and they need some shade, so this was one of the first examples of shade providing structures. Or so some of the common tensile structures that you all see everywhere here are those shade sail structures. You can see them in restaurants. So there they are not necessarily being used as a structural material. They are probably being used just as a form of covering. So this is again one of the earliest examples. And then we come to the today, the thing which is available today, which is pre-engineered fabric or structural coated fabric, which consists of a woven base cloth. As you can see over here, I'm zooming in. It consists of a woven base cloth which has a structural coating on the two surfaces. The woven base cloth is what is made of two directional threads. As you can see in the image, I hope it's clear. So threads are running in two directions. Like in any kind of weave, the dress that I'm wearing, the dress that you're wearing, all of it has weaves, right? So the weave is basically thread which is running in two different directions, orthogonal directions, the warp and the weft. And when there is this orthogonal weaving of these threads happening, the stretch happens easily or clearly. So if there is a regulated weave, so there's a reason why these are called engineered fabrics. They are not handmade. They need to be made via machines. Why? Because there needs to be very high level of precision involved, and they need certain level of coatings so as to improve the life. There is the UV coating. There is fire retardancy, which is provided with the help of coatings. Some of the fabrics are also such that they are mesh fabrics, wherein there is no additional top or bottom layer of coat, but the thread itself has certain coatings in it, so that you don't need another top or bottom layer, and you can get more transparency. You can get more light in the space which is being covered by these pre-engineered tensile fabrics. So with this advancement, what happened is that you could get fabric being supported by structural frames. So here in this case, there is a structural frame involved. So for example, in this model, which I just made a couple of hours back, you see I've used stocking fabric, and there is a structural frame involved over here, which is consisting of those struts that is holding the fabric in place. And without the struts or without the compression members, the fabric wouldn't have been able to achieve its desired level of tension. So here, the compression members, the placing of the compression members play a very, very important role. And in the workshop that we are going to deal with later in the 3-day workshop, we'll be learning on methods of hands-on modeling, about so many other technologies wherein you'll be able to apply your design thoughts or design principles and make scaled models by the end of the workshop. So going back to pre-engineered fabrics. Now, why was or how did pre-engineered fabric emerge? Basically, as we all know here, Fry Otto, he's one of the recipients of the Pritzker Prize Award, and he is the father of tensile architecture as we know today. So he was initially, during his schooling years, he was not aware of this, even the terminology called tensile architecture, but he came up with it due to circumstances. So he was part of the World War during that time in Germany, and he got imprisoned in France as a war. He was taken as a war prisoner, and his job over there was actually to build temporary shelters for other war prisoners using the parachutes that were hit down during the war. And he realized that the parachute is basically a very sturdy cloth, and he realized that if the parachute or if that cloth can be used in a particular manner, in a particular method, it can optimize the space that it encloses. It can optimize the material which is used, and through that came sort of his idea that there needs to be an architecture of fabrics, and it needs to have a niche. There needs to be a separate understanding, a separate approach towards the study of architecture of fabrics. And that's how he coined this term tensile structures. And he brought us this, he brought to us, me being one of the students, a new method, a new way of seeing these structures and how the form emerges. So he was never an architect who said that let me draw on a piece of paper and this is the kind of form that my structure is going to have. He loves experimentation, and he realized that it's with these experimentations that an optimal form can be emerged. Without experimentations, I cannot optimize my form. One of the reasons being that as we draw, architects are fantastical in nature. So we don't, in the process of drawing, we don't necessarily understand the effect of forces. But it is in the process of modeling, or rather I will say in the process of scaled modeling, that a certain understanding of force transmission, a certain understanding of material usability, a certain understanding of the kind of space volumetrics can be understood. And he developed these specific methods. So one of them being soap film modeling, and the other one being followed by fabric modeling. And he said that a temporary ephemeral architecture needs to emerge out of this. So he developed this innovative way of reusing spent parachutes in temporary shelters. So today's talk is going to we're going to cover these three things. The number one thing on the top right, you can see we are going to set up an experimental lab. So right now, due to the virus times, we are all on our own. So right now, this is my lab, this is my model, and my thought process. So each one of you, your environment is your lab. Your thought process is what you're going to use to utilize that environment. You can use any material as you can see in front of you. So in order to understand tension or tensile structures, I will say that if you have any piece of stretchy fabric that you can lay your hands on, please pick it up. It can be anything. See, I can't see you, nobody else can see you. So you can just pick up any piece of fabric that you can lay your hands on right now, so that when I'm speaking about forces, you can understand those by stretching the fabric in front of your hand. Then we'll be talking about one of his methods, that is soap film modeling, the form finding and structural analysis through physical iterations. And finally, we'll be concluding the day with some of the projects by architect Fry Otto. So after this seminar, after this webinar, you will probably be a part of tensile architecture or a tensegrity architecture workshop, and these will be some of the takeaways of those. I thought of introducing these so that you are aware that if I attend that workshop, this is what I'll get to learn. One of the first thing is fabric form finding, how to generate cutting patterns. So for example, the model right now that I'm holding here doesn't happen to have any cutting patterns here. It is it's not a cut fabric. It's one piece of fabric which I have just pushed and pulled and joined together, but it is sculptural in nature. The kind of fabric architecture that you will be working with in your projects will be realistic, and it will need cutting patterns, because those cutting patterns is what will mimic the real life 1:1 scale architecture that you will be building at one point of time. So at the end of the workshop, you will understand how to generate cutting patterns in your fabric. The second part is you'll be learning graphical interpretation, the method of photogrammetry. This is a method which I learned in ILEC, Institute of Lightweight Structures, wherein the method to convert my models into drawings, into scale drawings, was taught. So how to photograph your models. Photogrammetry basically is photographing the models in a specific setting that includes fabric models as well as soap film models. So the soap film models need to be photographed in a particular manner at a particular elevation with a specific aperture in your cameras, and again it needs to so there is something called a sciography which we can use. So we can use shadows being put forth from your model onto a screen behind to trace down the form that your model has taken. Why all of this doing? Why? Because our model is what is going to sort of interpret, or we are going to interpret the model to take or to make drawings out of it. Those drawings which are architectural drawings, which would further go into building. And the last part is translating these findings into architectural drawing. So here, by that I mean analyzing your model. So it's very important for all that we analyze what we have made. So good number of us, we make some beautiful forms, and in our student life itself, I guess each of us has made 300 or 400 odd forms, but how many of us actually sit down and analyze? So this is something that Fry Otto always insisted on, that it's very important to analyze your drawings. It's very important to analyze your models, because keen analysis gives forth to insights, and these insights are very useful while building, while translating the model to a 1:1 scale large project. Going back to why is form so important? I was talking about form and understanding of form, analyzing of form. So why is form so important? In this image right now, you see a girl's hands which are stretching the fabric in between her fingers. So fingers are acting as compression struts, and the fabric which is stretched in between her fingers is the membrane. So without her fingers supporting or stretching the fabric to its optimal space, the fabric wouldn't have got this kind of form. So I'm saying that the the structural framework is what gives the membranes its form, and we always need to optimize the form. So the optimization of the form here happens by adjusting the compression members. Here it's in this image, it's very easy, because all she needs to do is just take her hands apart, and the volume of the space enclosed will change, the curvature of the fabric will change. But if she brings her hand closer together, the fabric will get folded. It will sort of get, it will lose its tension. So she can take her hands further apart to increase the tension. But then there is a certain point at which she has to loosen it, because that is the breaking point. So modeling, as was taught to me at ELEC, is a method of physical iteration wherein you can sort of play around with the model and check what is the breaking point that the fabric takes. What is the point at which it can stretch no more? So coming up to Fry Otto and his form finding processes. So this is basically the methodology that is followed by his institute. The first step is preparing the soap solution. Now, soap solution here doesn't mean your regular soap. Although currently in the last few days of lockdown, I've been making most of my experiments while washing my utensils. So the kind of forms that used to be generated while doing that, so different utensils have different surfaces, right? And you stack them together, and sometimes soap sticks and these bubbles emerge. It is interesting to see the kind of curvatures they take. It's interesting to see the sort of volume that they enclose. Although my mind would say that no, this line probably should have been straight, but I was amazed to see that a dome was being formed. So this is really interesting. You should always keep experimenting, keep seeing, keep utilizing your everyday surroundings, and make the best use. So the first step that his institute followed was preparing the soap solution. Here was a very a specific kind of soap solution which was developed. It has water, it has glycerin, it has soap liquid, and it has a certain amount of baking powder. So there is a certain proportion involved, and everything comes together to prepare a thick soap solution so that your soap film model can last enough for photographing it, because we all know bubbles don't really last that long. So the second step, which was followed by his institute, was defining the boundary condition. So I have a couple of my wireframe models right now to show you. This is one of the wireframe models wherein I am defining the boundary condition. So this is the kind of boundary that I will be dipping into the soap solution and taking it out, so that, I hope you can see this. Oh, it burst. So you'll be able to understand, or if I hold it like this, maybe across the wall, it will be more clearer. Can you see the film here? And the kind of interface that it does with this. So it's really interesting to see that there is a curvature. So both of these form, there at the intersection point, there is a certain kind of curvature. And I wouldn't have been able to imagine it if I were drawing it and thinking about it. But it's these methods rather of utilizing physical experimentations that give rise to some of this. So this is basically a saddle here. but again, soap solution. Okay, let me show you some of the images. I think that will be better.
Yeah.
So on the right, you see some of his projects, some of his soap film modeling experimentations. I'll be zooming in to that, so that's clear. Yeah. So if you see in this image here, he has used a very basic defining boundary condition. There are two circles with a T in it, a rectangular framework, and he's just pushed the upper circle up and pulled the lower circle down after dipping it into the soap solution, and this movement was done simultaneously so that the soap film can form seamlessly. And the next step was this, which is available to you in the form of photograph, that is a photogrammetry, so that that curvature can be traced clearly. Now it's a very critical method because the bubble doesn't last really that long. So you need to be able to photograph it quickly in a precise manner at a particular angle of inclination, which the photogrammetric method teaches you. And then this method is then followed up by the fabric form finding method or a fabric modeling, because the same model which was emerged by the soap film modeling process is then translated and made a fabric model of. And then further there is an analyzing the structural properties of that fabric model by performing empirical tests. By empirical tests, I mean simple forces or simple pressures. So for example, I'm holding the model here right now, and if I say put a pressure here, the angle of inclination changes, the volume of space involved which is covered changes, and also the stresses along the fabric, along the boundary conditions changes. So each and every amount of force, whether I put the force from top, whether it's a lateral force, that is a wind load, whether it's a snow load, they all are going to deflect the fabric. So they are all going to sort of shake up the membrane. And believe me, the membrane structures which last long are designed for this shake-up. They are designed to withstand these forces. They are designed to hold their structural stability. They are designed to move, but at the same time hold their structural stability. So this is very important. The kind of anchors that these the struts go and anchor into the ground. For example, right now the thermocol is my ground plane, and I've anchored it to the ground with the help of pins. In real structures, these anchoring happens with the help of concrete buttresses, with the help of concrete foundations, and your struts go and enter these concrete foundations which run deep. One of the reasons that they need to run deep is because they need to be able to hold on to the deflections, and they are equipped with a steel plate on top, which again has some methodologies on top which allows these struts to move but not break. So here, these kinds of physical iterations Frey Otto was able to do with the help of, so this here is a steel mesh model, as you can see in the image right now, and you can see many pins over there. So numerous pins. Each of the pins is basically imitating the snow load which is going to come on the fabric. This is a 1:1 scale scale model which he built for the Stuttgart train station. And for this, his team did this small experiment wherein they were using the mesh here is a steel mesh that he has used, and he's put pins at regular intervals which mimic the snow load, and the deformation which comes across was measured due to these additional uniformly distributed loads, and this deformation is what made him so him and his team of structural engineers realized that what is the kind of necessary amount of tension that we need to increase in the fabric beforehand so that it's able to take these loads and not break or buckle under pressure. So coming up to my first part of our talk here on minimal surfaces. So here what we do is we utilize the surface tension of soap bubbles to develop optimized forms. So soap solution has this inherent nature of surface tension. Surface tension is nothing but the molecules coming together, bunching together, molecules of water, molecules of soap coming together and bunching together to cover the minimum area within a given frame to develop optimized forms. So for example, right now, if this is the frame or this is the boundary condition that I have, and I need to understand what will be the minimum area or minimal surface. What will be the minimal surface which will save material while building, which will be structurally stable, and which can withstand a certain amount of pressure. Soap solution will naturally give me that form. So I just simply utilize the inherent nature of surface tension to optimize my form. So all I need is a boundary condition. I need the soap solution. I'll be dipping my boundary condition within the soap solution to come up with a form. The bubble just came off and it burst. So surface tension here measures the energy needed to create a surface which acts as a physical surface minimizer. Since surface energy is proportional to the soap film surface, the film deforms to minimize its surface and thus its energy. And there is an even beautiful thing here, because if there are two boundary conditions which interact, you will be able to see the interfaces. So the way in which two bubbles join together. So here in this image shows one of my students' model. I think it is Ahan's model. Ahan is a student from Bhausaheb Hire College of Architecture, Mumbai, and this is I think I had photographed his model so this was a process that was involved. We stuck random sticks into our thermocol base, and we just stretched a long piece of thread through it and dipped the entire thing in the soap solution and took it out to come up with the minimum kind of surface area taken up by a combination of so if there needs to be a roof over these points, then what will be the design for that roof, where it uses minimum material, it achieves maximum stability, and it achieves the best kind of optimized structure. So this was the outcome actually of it. And what we did to make the form interesting is we just changed the heights of the struts. So as you can see, one of the struts is small in height, the other one is tall, and that gave us the beauty of anti-clastic forms. So even in this model, I've used some struts and I've placed them at differing heights and in different locations. Why? Because they increase the stretch between the fabric or they make these beautiful saddle shaped forms, anti-clastic forms as we call them. Now what's anti-clasticity? It is basically two curves which is running in opposite direction. So one of the curves here is running along this axis. I'll be holding the model like this. So this is one of the curves, and the other curve is going in this direction, in two opposing directions, so as to give me an anticlastic form. So tensile forms are majorly synclastic and anticlastic in nature. Synclastic is a uniform form like a dome. A dome is synclastic, and a saddle is anticlastic. So this was published in Architecture, Time, Space and People, the magazine by Council of Architecture, volume 15, during July 2015. I had written an article on soap film modeling here. So here what we are basically doing with soap films is doing more with less. That's why it's called minimal surfaces. So these are some of the basic forms. A catenoid, as you can see, arising from a catenary curve. So catenary curve is generally, I hope to show you a catenary curve with this. But since I'm holding the two endpoints with one hand, it is not a pure catenary. I should ideally hold the two endpoints in two different hands, but I can't do that. So you got to imagine. So a catenary curve is what is formed by holding a chain and holding the endpoints and letting gravity decide the curvature of taken up by the chain. If I invert this and construct it this way, it will be the most stable form. Why? Because simply physical forces of nature were acting on it while deciding the curvature. So a catenoid is basically here a form which is arising by rotating a catenary curve, as you can see in the image on the right top. So mathematically, a catenoid can be constructed by rotation of the curve, forming a hyperbolic paraboloid. So on the top, on the bottom left, there are two forms of catenoid surfaces that can emerge. Now there are a couple of videos here. I'll be sharing the link with you towards the end of the presentation. The second model is a helicoid. A helicoid is nothing but a helix. The boundary is made by a helical string. I'll dip the helical string in the soap solution, take it out, and what comes up as a soap film over my helicoidal boundary is called as a helicoid. This here is an image taken at ELEC against Stuttgart. This is gyroid. Now here we delve into NASA and space structures, because gyroid is a form which is developed by a NASA engineer, Alan Schoen, and is inspired actually from a calcium particle. There is a very complex geometry involved in the making of the boundary condition of the gyroid itself. It's not a piece of cake. It's pretty tough. I myself have not tried it by now. I would love to with some of my students' help, certainly. But the making of the gyroid boundary condition is what is the most complex part. And the soap solution will turn out fabulous, of course. But it's the boundary condition and the construction of the boundary which is tough, according to me. I haven't exactly seen blueprints of this, but I've seen the gyroid, as you can see. And you can easily create a 3D model using any of those 3D softwares. That's the easy part, but making a physical model is the tough part. Here the form is more efficient in compression. It has no plane of symmetry or straight lines, but it's capable of extending periodically in three independent directions. For example, a gyroid form can actually be coupled in, so you can build on this form. So this can be a building block, and you can build multiples of it and join them together to form one single cohesive design. Towards the end, I'm speaking about something really simple. That's a saddle or the hyperbolic paraboloid. So for the saddle, all you need is a boundary condition which looks like this. I hope it's clearly visible, right? So this will give you a saddle via soap fill modeling. On the bottom right, they have used 4 pins and they have kept the heights of the pins different and just immersed all the pins in the soap solution, taken it out, and what emerges is a saddle. This is another anti-clastic hybrid structure. This is a net designed by Design Collective Newman. It consists of multiple layers of flexible nets suspended in the air, and they made it as a sculpture. So this sculpture was made to sort of reanimate an old dilapidated building, and it was almost about to go in for it was going to be torn down, and they wanted the people of the city to experience the space or the building once again. So they thought of making a temporary sculpture inside it and inviting people over to see. So a floating landscape kind of was made here. And as you can see, the tension is really good for people to be able to sit in it. If you can see the image clearly, there is a woman who is sitting, there's a man who's standing here, someone else who's sitting, someone who's walking across. So here it's a pure play of tension. It's an absolute pure play of tension. Tension so strong that the point load, so these humans are putting on point loads, and it is deflecting, but it's not breaking. So, so these are basically some of the basic forms: the catenoid, helicoid, gyroid, saddle, and the costa. So the maths of the costa looks like this. Someone was asking me that if I were to mathematically convert your graphical drawings, this would be how the maths would look like. But as architects, I think we prefer to stick with the physical models. It is really difficult to come up with this maths. Someone with computational background probably can do this. So this is a computer generated model. This is how an initial mesh of a costa looks like. Then these are the iterations that are made to the initial orthographic mesh. So here we have straight edges, and then those edges curve together to form the costa. This is how a cut form of the costa looks like. And this is the model at ELEC again, a scaled model. Now, what's the beauty of my institute at Lightweight Structures is that they have preserved each of the models made by these students, made by FryAuto, kept them beautifully in glass enclosures because they are just marvelous. They are neat, clean, perfect examples of study, and they are very beautifully projected. So for all future students, including myself, it was a great learning experience wherein my department has so many models, and each one unique, each one a predecessor of its actual 1:1 scale built form. And I don't know how many of you know that my institute itself was a 1:1 scale mock-up of the Montreal 67 Expo. So FryAuto and his teams at that point of time, they wanted to understand the loading, the effect of snow load, wind load, and they were not satisfied with a small scale testing of the model. They built a 1:1 scale thing and they tested it. And finally, they went to the site and constructed the Expo 67 Montreal and its history. And they retained that 1:1 scale model as and housed it for my institute. And that's where all the students learn lightweight architecture within a 1:1 scale built space. So this is again reviewing all the basic forms. I'll be sharing the video later. This speaks of a modeling challenge which we'll be doing in our workshop. We'll be talking about interfaces. I'll zoom in so that you are aware. This is the material that we'll be using. We'll be using wire. Then we'll understand the shortest route. Now, shortest route is something which is very useful for planners. Any architect who's interested in finding the shortest route between the kitchen and the living room or the couch, so that you want to take up the shortest route to reach that space. And your planning needs to be such that you minimize that route. So we are going to utilize surface tension again and come up. Surface tension is going to solve the solution and bunch up the threads and sort of resolve so many planning issues, right from something as small scale as a living room to couch, that is a domestic use, to large scale cities. And Frei Otto and his team have actually used this technique for the planning of these large cities. New cities, as you know, after the World War, many of the cities were rebuilt, Berlin, Munich, Stuttgart as well. And their team actually went and spoke to the German government at that time and suggested this method to come up with the most optimized point of connections between 5 different specific spaces, and what will be the best possible route connecting them all. It's very easy to draw random things and then to measure each line segment and then to find out, okay, let's increase this, let's decrease this. But it's super easy via a SOAP solution. All you need to do is take out a very detailed map, put in the points, join them by thread, dip it in a solution, take them out. The threads will bunch together at places where it is optimal. They will spread apart at places which is optimal again. And all you need to do is construct the actual trace out the thing. Then there is the architecture of SOAP films. We'll be using paper U-pins, wire and thread. And of course, the part 3 is building unimaginable forms. We all love to do that. So that will be followed by analysis. I'd like to zoom in and show some of his analysis. This is Frei Otto's study on optimized path systems. So all nodes are connected by threads here. Then slowly the threads start bunching together. And it's very important to analyze. So he always stressed on the importance of analysis. You can make some really fantastical discoveries, and without the analysis which goes with it, your discovery will not exactly be put into motion. This is some of the analysis that I did with my students again at Balirami Ray College of Architecture. Again, I guess this is a part of a research paper which got published. Yes, Architecture, Time, Space and People. This is one of the torsional studies which was done by his team. It's this image is from a research paper, the use of SOAP films in solving torsion problems. Wherein, so this is a steel flange, right? So in order to analyze the effect of torsion on a regular cross-section of steel or timber, SOAP film technology can actually be used. The contour lines are mapped using a steel needle point with a micrometer screw. Now, this is not possible in a home environment. One of the reasons is that a certain technical setup needs to be there. So, the institute had it, and there is something called as a micrometer screw and steel needle points and all. And the locations where those contour lines were bunched together require higher torsional stiffness, as these areas goes under high stress, and these areas require lesser torsional stiffness. So basically it teaches us that you can take out material from certain places and have more material some other places. So this is this is probably a catenoid. Yes. So as the two circles are pulled apart at a specific point of distance, the catenary splits and the minimal surface degenerates into the areas of two circular discs. Now it's important to not just study the soap film, but also to study till what extent it can withstand forces before breaking, and what is the point of breakage. So this is that video, small video. Can you see the video?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great.
But there's no audio there.
Yeah, there's no audio. That's just very small light music. I wanted to share many other videos, but they are long. So I selected this one, which is the shortest. So coming up to some of his build projects. So this is the on-field execution methodology which is utilized, and it takes current execution methodology takes these 4 steps. The first is form finding, so film modeling, fabric modeling, followed by structural simulation. You can see this image here. The structural simulated models have these different colors. These different colors basically show stresses in different parts of the fabric, which is followed by computational wind engineering testing of the design, again via a digital model, followed by a 1:1 scale construction of a scale prototype. This is a very important stage, building 1:1 before actually going and building on site. Why? Because even after so many scaled models, so many computational machine generated models, it's sometimes difficult to sort of anticipate the exact challenges that you're going to face on site if you haven't built a 1:1 scale prototype. But again, this is possible only when there are modules. So say if the site has 50 such prototypes which are going to be built, like this is one of the umbrellas which is being used at Medina Mosque. So if the Medina Mosque courtyard utilizes this, and it's a project by SL Rash GmbH, and they have these openable umbrellas, inverted umbrellas actually collapse and open. So they open up during the noon time when there is the prayers which are going to be held in the mosque courtyard, and then they contract during the evening time, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. That it's a seamless opening and closing, almost like a flower, and this seamlessness was achieved by many of these rigorous processes. So building a scale prototype first of all, which is like this, then followed by structural simulation, the wind energy testing, and finally building a 1:1 scale prototype before building it on site. So some of the other projects which FryAuto realized while using the soap fill modeling technology was Tanzbrunnen in Cologne, which was built in 1957. Some of his earliest projects, it will look really simple. Believe me, look at this image right now. So on the top is the soap fill model. Yes, both of these are soap fill models. One is photographed against a black backdrop. The other is photographed against a white backdrop. This is the actual project. You should watch this documentary of FryAuto. It is called Spanning the Future, and it's in that he speaks of some of his earliest projects. This is one of his first projects actually, and he says that at that point of time, he, being an architect, he had a model maker who by that point of time had just made circus tents as a material supplier and a structural site supervisor. He just had that person. He did not have a civil engineer at that point to collaborate with him. And with someone who has just built circus tents, for someone to be able to realize these structures was a big achievement at that point of time. And he says that for me, my earliest projects, which were small in scale, but they were high in impact, and they sort of gave him the confidence to build later on. So something that I would like to pass on to each of you listeners here, each of you who are architects, who are probably teachers, who are students, is that no matter the scale of your model, no matter the smallness, the littleness of your experiments, please record them well. It's quite possible they would, at a later point of time, towards the end of your life, you'll realize they were my biggest achievements, or they were the starting point which gave me the courage to go forth. And today, this model that I made, I probably would not have been able to make it if my students would not have supported me. So my experimental lab, the tensile classes which I had at Hire, at Kamla Raheja, at all the workshops which I did in Bangalore, Dayanand Sagar College of Architecture, at Hampi Center for Design, IIT Roorkee, I conducted one workshop. So if the students would not have been really encouraging of would not have believed in me and would have had an open mind and explored different forms, I probably would not have been able to come up with this even. So it is all thanks to each and every small contribution that I've had in my life. I've learned a lot from each of the people who have attended my lectures, seminars, workshops, and it's a collaborative effort that everyone learns from. So something that I would like to share here is later in FryAuto's life, some of his colleagues said that you come across more as a civil engineer rather than an architect. And many of the civil engineers thought that he's more like an artist rather than an architect. So what he was is actually an amalgamation of an artist, a sculptor, a civil engineer, and an architect. And he says that I wouldn't have been successful in my field of tensile architecture if I wouldn't have been able to seamlessly cross these bridges. And I think this is where Hampi Center for Design comes into play, has a crucial thing to impart here, is because this is the one-off place I see which is truly trying to integrate these different disciplines together. You need to be able to think materially. to be able to imagine what other material can possibly give me this kind of form. You need to be a material engineer. You need to be a civil engineer to understand the forces. You need to be an architect. You need to be a sculptor to come up with this. So, not to sort of channel yourself into one particular framework, but rather to keep an open mind and be inclusive of different ideas, of different thought processes, join them all together, learn from others, and be in an environment where these different dialogues take place. That's very, very crucial. Something I realized which is highly lacking in most of our architectural colleges, we never have dialogue with civil engineering students. We hardly have dialogue with sculptors. We completely ignore material scientists, and we certainly don't interact that way. And this is something wherein the first step, when I entered the Institute of Lightweight Structures and Professor Jürgen Hennecke spoke to me, he has been a colleague of Ryoto, and Professor Werner Zobeck, who was my HOD, said that you have to unlearn to learn. You need to be able to open up your mind to different possibilities to be able to come up with something absolutely unique. So this was his next project, the Expo 67 Montreal. You see the soap film model on the top. It is really, really interesting here. So I'll be starting with, this is purely just visual photographs of, some of the forms that were realized by a collaboration between me and my students. We came up with this. So in order to come up with a form, you have a structure, you have a skin, you have an idea, and you need optimization. The optimization, the soap film will solve. The idea needs to come in from the head. The skin, the tension, inherent tension in the fabric will solve. The structure is again something which you need to think of. So like I said, we all have to design a boundary condition and then think about the optimization. So I'll be sharing a couple of exploratory models. Location is Experimental Lab, Mumbai. Most of my work was in Bombay with my students again at Hire, and Kamla Reja towards the later part. So this is what I came up with, some write-up about an experimental lab, which I thought that there isn't any in an architecture college, so there should be a space like that. So soap film modeling, photogrammetry, again some of my students' works. Fabric modeling. This is actually a first year student's work. A high level of skill, a very good finish, and a mind to explore. I was blown away, truly, when they came up with this. They were ready to sit beyond regular college hours and work with me. These are IIT Roorkee students' works. We came up with these models in a matter of half an hour time. Very quick visualizations, conceptions. More sculptural in nature. This, I believe, is a student's work at LS Raheja College of Architecture, Bandra. I was invited there for a workshop during the college fest. So here we are dealing with fabric outside and the struts inside, something similar to this model that I've made right now. These are students from IIT. This is 1:1 scale installation which we did as part of Tarash in Mumbai. We built one of our models, and we actually tested certain things like the joineries. We tested the stretching property. We tested how the boundary needs to, so whether we need to have a cable in the boundary so as to be able to increase the tensional property. And of course, the very beautiful learning or takeaway out of this installation was our model is X, but our installation is X.1, I'll say. It's slightly different because there are certain things like on-site forces which you would not have envisioned previously. And they had to sort of change a little, adjust the heights, increase the tension. So these are small learnings which can only be imparted by building 1:1. Class project, this was wherein we were doing fabric within the space frame, and then the second was this was actually a challenge which was set forth for them. So if there is a fixed frame, for example, in the image before, so the frame in all the three situations is the same, but the volume of spaces that fabric encloses is different in each. That is possible by shifting the places where the fabric is sticking to, or changing the curvatures of it, and making small iterations. But at the end of the day, the kind of volumetric experience changes completely. The frame remains the same. So this is frame within the fabric. So without cutting the fabric, what can you do to stretch out the fabric and increase its tensional property? Some of the installations, actually, these are 1:1 scale installations, not done by me. These are some other students' works in different universities. So coming up to pre-stress. So pre-stress is really important here to understand, because individual tension lines here, the strings, wire, rope, membrane, all of these are adding to the tension, right? They are all attached to the end of the struts as shown, so that each assembly comprises a closed network. There is a closed loop of tension and compression parts. That is very important. In a tensile structure, you can't leave an end hanging. You cannot leave the fabric loose. You need to close the loop so that tension is maintained. And each tension line connects individually to the ends of two struts, so that the forces are equally distributed. You cannot have one point of channeling. So in a tensile structure, you cannot say that if I remove that one strut which is supporting the membrane, maybe the entire thing will collapse. No, because there are different anchorage points which are also taking up the forces. So it is a combination. So the force transference to the ground happens in many different directions. One is directly vertically through the vertical strut. Second is in a horizontal manner through the edge cables. If the edge cables are running parallel to a wall, or if they are embedded in a wall system, or if they are tied to the ground with ground anchors, then a certain force is also transferred via these edge cables. And finally, towards the end, it is the weave in the fabric which is taking all the stress. So it's the pre-stress which is provided to the weave. So if you can, so these pre-engineered fabrics which are available in the market today, they are pre-stressed. So the weaves, so the individual weave or the individual warp and weft threads are stressed, so that while on site, then needs to be minimal amount of tension pulling which has to happen. So this pre-stress acts as a very crucial factor in realizing a very sound tensile structure project. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that the tensile structure works with a simultaneous relationship of articulated material behavior and differentiated structural form. So by this I mean that the material plays an equally important role as a structure or the inherent inside supporting structure. So it's a play of the two that brings forth a successful tensile structure. And this is the cover of my book. Here I'm talking basically a result of 2 years of intensive study on introducing deployable tensile space dividers in solving urban crunch or space crunch issues in urban homes. I worked in 2 spaces here. One is the lab at IIT Roorkee. The other one was Institute of Lightweight Structures, where I was a research scholar. Both of these labs helped me to sort of come up with a working principle wherein there is a deployable wall panel which can, at a click of a button, sort of separate out spaces in an open plan house. So most of the houses which are currently really functioning very well are open plan homes. But you can't exactly have such open planning. Current pandemic shows us that you need some enclosures at certain points of time. For example, if someone is unwell in the family and they need to have a quick enclosure, they need to separate themselves out from the rest of the family, such kind of wall systems will be really useful because they can quickly drop down from the ceiling because they are deployable in nature, they are lightweight, and they are minimum in the form of, they're not too tech. For example, you don't need a very high level of computer simulated home for these wall panels to work. They are little mechanical in nature so that the life increases. And if need be, I can share the entire process that went into this making of these through another webinar or possibly a workshop. So here I used biomimetic principles. I used ergonomics to come up finally with the solution. This book is available online on Lambert on www.morebooks.de. But I have e-copy of the same, and if anyone is interested in buying it, they can contact me. I can share it. It is pretty expensive in euros, but it's not so because I'm an author. Okay.
Right.
Thank you so very much for listening to me and taking out your time. And I think I'll move over to Chetan sir. It was a simple model. So a simple model was just consisting of a rectangle, 2 pins, 2 pieces of thread, that's it. And the curvature that developed out of it is what was utilized in designing this Expo 67 Montreal. And as you see in this image over here, there is a huge team which is working on building a small scale model. He also said that collaborations were very important. He said that the team which built the small scale model gets the confidence to build a large scale model because they actually experimented on it. They debated, they worked their heads off, and they came up with these complex drawings. This is a roof contour plan, scale at 1:1/800. And each of these lines are developed from this model. So this is not a directly computer generated drawing. It's developed physically. Although this project, I believe, was one of the first projects wherein a little help of computers was utilized to do some calculations, some mathematical calculations, but most of the force transference was all done physically through physical models. And he used steel mesh because at that time the fabric was not strong enough to hold the strain inherent. This is another project that Fray Otto speaks about very fondly. This is the Mannheim Multi-Halle. It is a funicular model, and it's actually compression structure. It's not a tension structure, because here he's using wood, which is good in compression, and he's using thin slats of wood and weaving them together to form this. So there is a grid shell which is formed using wood panels, which is woven together, and it was developed in this form. So if you see this image, it was actually tested in an upside down position like a catenary curve. So the form development happened upside down, and then it was constructed the other way around. So again, we are coming to the end of the presentation. So I think I've covered this. One more thing that we can possibly cover in a future workshop is understanding of air-inflated pneumatic architecture. And I think we are, yes, we are done with the presentation. I would like to share a few images.
Awesome. I think great learnings today on a lot of new words, a lot of technical words spoken out. Questions for you. Chandrasekhar Shankar, who is the CEO of Vision Healthcare, says, any tensegrity structures with bamboo?
With bamboo? No, not that I have seen. Not that I have seen as of yet. Tensegrity structures actually are pretty new currently. Tensegrity being coined earlier on by Buckminster Fuller, but bamboo as a material being used for tensegrity structures, no. We did one using paper tubes in Bharati Vidyapeeth College of Architecture, but bamboo can very well be used. It's excellent because it provides a necessary amount of compression and it can take in a slight amount of bending. So I believe tensegrity structure with bamboo is quite a possibility.
Great. Yeah, I think if I'm really looking at the two elements of any tensegrity structure, the compression member and the bamboo which is in tension.
Most of the structures right now in the world are in steel, in tensegrity. They are all in steel, which are built large scale. That is, the small scale experimental ones are made in different materials, paper tubes, possibly bamboo, because many schools of architecture around the world are really exploring this. NASA is also exploring tensegrity. It has actually a team of tensegrity architects, which is developing habitation for Mars using this technology of tensegrity. And I spoke to ISRO scientists, I think last September. I was in Lucknow during that time. I was pregnant and I got an opportunity to be in the ISRO campus. And I spoke to some of the ISRO scientists, gave a presentation over there on how tensegrity can be utilized for developing Mars rovers for our own space center. NASA is doing it, but why not us? So.
Right. No, but if you look at the bridge design at the Bali school, I think that's more of a tensegrity structure where bamboo is one of the main members of construction.
Okay.
Meghil Karekar, who is a partner with Karekar and Associates, a very senior firm in Bangalore. Very nice to have you on this platform, madam. How do you identify the warp and weft directions in the fabric?
So the warp and weft directions are identified by, so every fabric has these orthogonal direction of weaves. So it is, you can call each, so I may call this a warp. So if I show the model here, I can call this direction as warp and this direction as weft. But it is basically not a problem for me to interchange the two. I can again say that this is the warp and this is the weft. So it is basically interchangeable in nature. There are two orthogonal weaves which are going across, and they are basically termed as warp and weft. Both are in tension. Both need to be in tension for the tensile structure to be erect.
Right. Great. Aditi Garg, who is a BAc student in IIT Roorkee, says, what is the proportion? What is the proportion of the ingredients of the soap solution?
Yes. So here is the soap solution which was there at ELEC. They were having something called as an industrial soap solution, which I was not privy to the knowledge of exact proportion which they had used. I just saw the solution over there. But the soap solution which I have used again with Aditi and so many other students during my workshop is a combination of 40% of dishwash liquid, 50% of water, 10% of glycerin. So this is basically the basic proportion, and a little bit of baking soda.
Right. I think Chandrasekhar, CEO Vision Healthcare, has also mentioned the same in this answer to that question. Yeah. He also puts in an interesting query of, can you share some example of tensegrity structures in India?
Tensile structures or tensegrity structures?
He's talking about tensegrity structures.
Tensegrity structures. Okay, tensegrity structures there aren't any in India. Very unfortunate to say, but there aren't any. I'm one of the first people I come across who is speaking about building tensegrity models. So we are still on the model
concept
stage.
Level. Concept level.
Yeah.
We should build something soon.
Yes.
At HCD, we'll build a.
At HCD, we actually did build one.
We did.
So there are two places in India currently which have built. So one is Hampi Center of Design. The first students at Hampi Center of Design built a basic tensegrity 3 dowel model. Then they went on to build a 6 dowel tensegrity model. At Bharati Vidyapeeth, Bombay, we built a very large roof deployable canopy using tensegrity paper tubes. So these are the two built examples. And again, tensegrity is a system which is purely self-learned. I did not learn it at Institute of Lightweight Structures. I just got exposed to the idea of tensegrity over there, thanks to Prioto again. But it's completely self-learned, and I am exploring it currently. I'm also currently researching on utilizing tensegrity to mimic the hand action. For example, I'm into developing a prosthetic hand for myself. So hi here. So right now I don't wear a hand because the kind of prosthetic hand which I have is too heavy and takes up too much time. So there is very bad time lag. So if I want to pick up a mug, I have to channel my brain and to press a couple of buttons with my existing hand over here, which is pretty biomechanical. And so one step happens. So first the elbow opens, then the wrist rotates, and then the fingers contract. So it's very bad that for someone who is used to doing things quickly. So for me, tensegrity opens up a completely different approach because here everything is connected via tensile network. So if I can possibly develop a tensegrity based lightweight biomimetic hand, which requires minimal amount of force or intuitive indication put forth by me to sort of come up with the final resolution that this is what I need the hand to do. That is my aim. So minimalism is the key here. I'm thinking of using tensegrity here.
Awesome. Great. We have a couple of questions by Nirali, who's a student of CAD, and Vedant Kopar, who is a student of Dr. Baliram Hiraik's College of Architecture.
Vedant Kopar, I know.
Yeah, what softwares do you use for digital simulation and analysis?
Yeah, so there is FormFinder. You can use Rhino, you can use Grasshopper with plugins, of course. FormFinder is the most basic software. I think with Vedant, we had utilized FormFinder as part of our course curriculum. Towards the end of it, we did utilize the software to come up with a basic form analysis. It gives a shadow analysis and something really simple. With Grasshopper and Rhino plugins, you will be able to do more structural calculations with those softwares. But a FormFinder is a very simple and intuitive kind of a software to begin with.
Right. We have Aditi again, who's asking, how do we get the contours of the tensile model?
How do you get the contours of the tensile model? Very good question. So if this is the model that I have here, and I want to make a drawing of the same, and my drawing needs to have contours to it, or rather it needs to have cutting patterns to it, which will help me build the actual model at 1:1 scale. So there are so before understanding the contour mapping, there is a need to understand that at the scale at which the fabric needs to be built, I cannot exactly have the entire thing in one piece of cloth. So I'll probably have this as a triangular piece. I'll probably have this separate one as another triangular piece, and there will be a welding joint over here. Now, in order to be able to draw a top plan of this model, contour lines can be taken off by closely watching the threads. Now, I don't think it's very clearly visible in the camera, but are you able to see the thread bunching together and stretching towards the base?
Right.
Okay. So at certain places, what you can do is you can physically draw lines on the model, and then you can take off the model, stretch it on a sheet, and then pin certain things so that you're able to trace those onto your drawing paper. So this is what the model can give you a direct takeaway of. So I can use my pencil over here. I can see that at a certain point, the angle drastically changes. So from one point over here to another point over here, there is very little difference in the angle or the curvature. But again, at this point, there is many small curvature differences. So that is how you map the contour. So your lines will be bunched together here, because again, this is a high point. Your lines will be spaced out further because this is a low point. So this is how you contour map from a model to a 2D drawing based on the model. So if there is a high point here and you see the fabric stretching, for example, if you can see clearly over here, the fabric stretches a lot where the mast is puncturing the fabric. So there the contour lines will be more. And at the base, the contour lines will be further spread apart. So that's how you make contours from a model again.
Right. I mean, of course, there are latest computing stuff like the LiDAR scanner. LiDAR scanner can scan this whole object into a 3D model immediately and give it to us in SketchUp or AutoCAD, and that can help us scan it much faster. Great. We have Ramesh, who is the dean of Acharya School of Design. A very good friend of mine, and he's doing some very interesting work in Acharya. What are the industrial tensile materials available today, and how long does this sustain? Will this sustain weathering like sun, rain, etc.?
So some of the industrial tensile materials are PTFE, then ETFE coated glass cloth, and then there is PVDF, and these are some of the materials. Each have different fire ratings, each have different pros and cons. Some are good for indoor spaces, some are good for large scale projects, some are mesh based fabrics, some are pure steel nets, and then one of the best parts about most of these fabrics are, I'll share a presentation or a video rather, which talks about these technical specifications, and there is a beautiful table wherein each material has, so if this material is good in fire rating, this has a longer shelf life, but some other material has a higher shelf life but less fire rating, so it is more adaptable to a certain kind of project. So there is a beautiful table which is generated by Architent Landrell PVD, this company, and I did utilize it as a student too. When I had to, I used tensile structures in my BR projects, and my professors used to ask me, "What material is it made of?" And so you need to know exact technical terminology, you need to know the material, why you're using this material. But as an architect and a researcher, I realized one more very crucial thing is these materials are limited to something which is completely artificial. I agree they are reusable, and that adds to a greener shelf life, but I would love to see some natural material being involved, especially something like coconut coir. And this is something I discussed with my professors in Germany, and they were very much for it. They said that, Shreya, if you want to utilize tensile fabrics in homes, and if the environment is humid, hot and humid, you need to think of a different material. These artificial materials will do great because you can incorporate photosynthesis. So there are light luminescent things which can be woven into the fabric, which can harness daylight and give back ambient lighting in the night. But they are all artificial at the end of the day. And for breathable homes, for breathable spaces, you need natural materials being incorporated there. So there needs to be, so this is my takeaway at the end of my book actually, that I have thought about a design, I have thought about the framework of the design, but there needs to be a lot of research in the material. And it would be excellent if I can collaborate on material scientists, material researchers, or probably some of them could form a part of the Humphrey Center for Design Search, if you can think of them, who are actually working on developing new materials, probably biomimetic materials, utilizing coconut coir, utilizing cotton, utilizing other materials which have a certain level of stretch, which have tensional capabilities in them, but if they can be incorporated in the in a pure tensile form as well. So yes, material research has a complete different play.
Yeah, this also answers one of the question by Akhil, who asked whether ETFE is a tensile membrane. And
Yes, it is. It's ethylene tetrafluoroethylene. That's the
ethylene tetrafluorine, ethylene, right?
Ethylene.
So like a glass-like fiber.
Glass-like fiber. It allows you maximum amount of light penetration.
Right.
So for the spaces wherein you're using tensile fabric for a courtyard, wherein you want maximum amount of light penetration, and at places like desert projects, for example, if you're building in Riyadh or if you're building in Abu Dhabi, and you want your fabric to withstand high level of sand abrasion, ETFE is the material to choose.
Great. Another interesting question by Ast Pradhan, who is a student of SPA Vijayawada.
Mhm.
If to be taken as a thesis project related to tensegrity, can you give some ideas for it?
Yeah, there is. Okay, one of the most lovely research projects I think which can be taken up is deployable shelters. Tensegrity is in essence a deployable structural form. So for deployable shelters for flood affected areas, deployable shelter for earthquake affected areas, a design which can sort of collapse and also open up. So that's what tensegrity is. It's a tension which integrates the compression members in one place. So it's excellent for deployability. So any kind of deployable shelter, deployable projects, tensegrity is the thing to choose.
Right.
And of course, if you want to deal with extra extra sort of you want to design on Mars. Yeah,
Space.
space architecture. Space architecture tensegrity is the best thing because it doesn't rely on gravity. And most of the architecture which is built on Earth is completely compression based. They are standing because there is gravity in picture. The moment you take off gravity, they'll all crumble. Tensegrity structures won't. So here, tensegrity structures will come into play if you want to build in high pressure systems. Maybe you want to build underwater. You want to build in a place with low gravity. You want to build on moon. You go tensegrity.
Awesome. Nice. Great. Yeah, I think certain questions which are
This
basic
is very good.
is
What is the
tensile.
difference between tensegrity and tensile structure?
Right. Right.
So I will answer it in a simple word. All tensegrity structures are tensile structures, but not all tensile structures are tensegrity structures.
Awesome. Simple answer. Great. Atik Aminbai also talks about economical feasibility. I think economics
Yes,
is
it's a
always
very
related. Yeah, it's always related to how much you use. The more
how
you
much you use.
the
So
more you,
here, fabrics are expensive. One reason because they are not exactly manufactured. From our country perspective, they are not manufactured here. They are manufactured off-site. They are manufactured mostly in Germany. Most of fabric manufacturers, high-tech fabric manufacturers are in Germany. And we import those things. So automatically, if you are importing a material, the cost improves. And that adds to the project cost. Number two is the optimization in the usage of the fabric. So if you have not optimized your model, if you have not utilized soap fill modeling and come up with a model which is more complex, utilizes more fabric to cover the same area or maybe cover the same volume, then you are adding to the project cost. So it's very, very important that you iterate at the model stage to reduce final overall project cost, so as to come up with an optimal material usage. So that optimization happens at the model stage.
right. Awesome. I think the last question is tensile structure used only as a shell?
No. Only synclastic tensile structures are shells. All other tensile structures are so much more than shells.
Yeah, man. Today you're talking about tensile architecture even for biomimetic arms and things like that. So,
Yes.
right. I think Ask
So
Pradhan
before
says,
I mentioned regarding tensegrity structure, are there any other case studies available?
let's,
What I do is,
let's build a case study, Asks.
yes. So we are actually building the case studies. There are case studies. There is a bridge in Australia which is built using tensegrity structural system, but there is a huge amount of debate whether it's truly tensegrity or whether it's not. Most of the successful, beautiful, clean tensegrity structures I have seen are all in modeling stage. So it is up to you and it is up to the future generation of architects to really utilize this technology and make the most of it, because there isn't much till date.
Right. Okay? I think longevity of tensile structure, we've already answered that. Anything else from the chat box? Yeah, I think a lot of praise for the session.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys. I think, one sharing from you is about your experience of losing that hand.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a hair raising situation. Please to share it with all the participants here.
Okay, all right. So basically, the reason why I'm sitting here in front of you all is thanks to two key people. One is my brother. He wanted to be part of my very first webinar, and he is one of the people who, if he wouldn't have been present, I wouldn't have been alive. As simple as that. So at the accident site, he decided that I have to take my sister out of the rubble. He went and sought help, and I came across a very big-hearted and great army man, ex-army man, who lives in Kalina, Mumbai, who understood that her case is critical, and I was pressed under debris. So our train basically derailed due to a terrorist attack, and I was sleeping in the top bunk. So as I fell down, I lost consciousness, and there was another train which came and hit our train, which was a goods train basically, which sort of resulted in my right hand getting severed completely except for a few tendons. So in this all hotspot situation scenario, I'm losing a lot of blood. Two things happened. One was me losing consciousness, gaining consciousness, and thinking about I'm at the 4th year stage of architecture and I may lose my life. I've been doing really well academically, and do I really want to die? My answer was no. I don't want to die. So this thing that sort of pushed me was a self-belief that I have things to do. Like you say, miles to go before you sleep. I have things to do. So that was one. And second was a very loving, very supportive family, friends, hospital staff, all these people who took care, who made me sit right now in front of the camera. Right now, my family is taking care of my little baby. He's 10 months old. And I think he is crying for me as well. So I'll probably have to say bye-bye soon.
Yeah, we wouldn't keep you away from your kid for too long. No, the first time I met her, I think this was some great learning for me that come what may, that she had to literally survive close to around 8 to 10 hours of the time next to the tracks of the train, waiting for help to come. And then, after 10 hours, she was taken in, and she knew, she was holding on to her arm for that 10 hours with just few tendons. And I'm sure that it was tensegrity there which helped her hold on to his hands.
No, it is a tenacity of the mind and the heart.
That's right. So I think an amazing learning, amazing influence in my personal life in terms of how do you approach life positively. And post that, it's always been a positive set of approaches for me. And hats off to Shreya for giving me that hope that life is not so is not too difficult to face. And, if Shreya has come through that journey and made it so beautifully,
actually, this was also something which was
in the fourth year, and then in the fifth year, she topped the university.
no, sir. I actually topped the university in fourth year.
Fourth year.
Fourth
Oh,
year,
wow.
yeah. So when I was in the hospital, I got my results. That the hand which had drawn all of this is no more, but that gave me a university topper position. So it was like I have to do something with my left.
Right. Hats off. Okay, thank you for this wonderful session, Shreya, and looking forward for the workshop, which on first, second, and third. People who are interested, please to register. I think the links are already up in the chat box. Please to register for the workshop, and let's
Thank you
all
everyone
have a
for
lot of
taking
fun.
the time out and to listen to me. This is my very first webinar and I was not very prepared. Very frankly, I was just thinking of imagining seeing all the faces and speaking that way because I'm a very interactive person. I need to see people, I need to do things, I need to see them do things.
Right.
So this was a one-off for me, but I hope to take it further because the current situation, you need to be able to be resilient and you need to be able to do the best possible in whatever situation life throws at you. So right now, life is throwing this at me.
True. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for this amazing session. I'll be putting open the. If anyone wants to watch the trailer, I will. But Shreya, you're free to get back to your kid if it's required. Otherwise, I'll just share this small 2-minute video of that trailer of that documentary we're talking about.
Yeah. I don't see the trailer. Was it already played?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, I didn't actually see it.
Okay, I will share that with you. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, I'm so sorry. I couldn't. Should I restart that?
Yeah, I think.
Just a moment. Anyways, I will share it with the people. I'll be sending a mail across to everyone. I'll be sharing that link to all of you so that you'll be able to see it. Or we can have a joint screening.
There is a full movie. There is a
we
full
can have
movie of.
we can see that full movie on AirMeet itself. We can all meet up and then have a discussion on that movie at the end of that session if it's required.
Okay.
I will try and see if that can become an activity. I'll talk
Okay,
to
okay.
Harsha and see whether it can be organized. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that active participation, and do register for our workshops. be a
Yes.
part of the Center of Design, and looking forward for an amazing activity on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd with Shreya. And on this 18, 19, 20th, I am having a workshop on nature-inspired design thinking, on how do we look at nature as a problem-solving exercise. So anyone interested, please do join. I'll be closing this session and opening up the social meeting space where you can have virtual networking for some more time. Okay, I'll be there for some time, and if anyone wants to meet up, it's great. Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
Shreya. Bye bye.
Bye bye.